Hey guys, welcome back to Vince Vale Custom. So today we are going to start a work in progress series for the year 2020. It's early January. I wanted to start this off in 2019, but I got backtracked on with a lot of commissions, and so I had to put a couple personal stuff on hold. But I figured this would be a good chance to start getting this statue prepped up, and then we can work on this throughout the year. I don't know how long it's going to take. It's a side project, but it's a large side project, and this stuff is not priority. My main priority is always commissions and stuff like that for people first, and this stuff is kind of like where I throw in at the side, or if it's just one of those like weekends I need to take to myself and do my own personal stuff, these are like one of these things I'll work on. Plus it's good for like a YouTube series where people can see like what's involved with these types of statues. So this is a Poison Ivy statue from Sideshow Collectibles. It was sculpted by Mark Newman. It is a really beautiful statue. It's one of my favorites from him. I've done a bunch of customs off of it already. I've done a bunch of repaints for people. It's definitely like an underrated statue. When she came out, I think she was around, I want to say like $360. I could be wrong. Maybe this time when this statue came out, it hit the $450 mark. I'm not really sure. It's been a while. I know if you hunt eBay and you're careful, sometimes you could find her maybe around $300, $350 mark. She stands about, from the bottom of her foot to the top of her hair, about 18 inches or so. She probably weighs around 3 to 4 pounds because it is polystone. So it's not really a small statue. It's a very expensive statue. So it's a very sexy statue too. It's a really, really beautiful statue. Now the idea is I want to make Jessie from Pokemon. Now, I didn't really grow up on Pokemon. Basically, I grew up on, DC comics, Marvel comic books, Transformers, G.I. Joe, He-Man, stuff like that. So by the time Pokemon came out, I really wasn't into it. I think I probably was even in college too at the time, so I really never really got into it. But I do like the character designs, and I love some of the artwork from it because I go on like DeviantArt or Google, and whenever I'm looking up types of characters or reference art, sometimes this stuff pops up, and I just decide to kind of look through the stuff and see what's out there. And people do some really good types of drawings of these characters that are anime, but they make them look realistic, just like this artwork right here. It's sort of like, a little bit more comic book looking, but it's got sort of an anime look to it. So that kind of gave me the idea to kind of do this statue in 2019, but I just didn't have the time. Too much stuff kind of got in the way. But I think this will be a good project for the year. So I went on, DeviantArt. I checked out a bunch of other stuff. So I was deciding, should I use this Poison Ivy for another superhero statue, or kind of venture out and try more, what if stuff. So I know this is a superhero statue. It's a little bit more realistic, and she's more of an anime type character, but that's what I want to do, is I want to try to take the anime character and transition it into like a superhero statue and see what it would look like. It's just something different. It's a lot of fun. Stuff like this I just like to experiment with, and then, after it's done, I usually throw it on eBay just to pay for supplies, computer parts, better camera, stuff like that. So I think this will be a fun series. So I went on DeviantArt, I checked out some more stuff, just how people draw the character. Some people draw the black on her to feel like a little bit more latex look. Some people draw a little bit flatter. Some people throw a lot of wrinkles and stuff into her shirts, where other people don't. Like you can see right here, this character pose is almost like the Poison Ivy right there. So that kind of gives you an idea that it could work pretty well. I know her hair has a specific style to it. I understand that. And kind of not really going that look, That's more of the anime look. I think with this one is the hair is going to be down. But I have to kind of figure out, I'm going to change up the hair a little bit, but I don't know how far or how much I'm going to change it, because I'll kind of go over this in a second on how this is casted up. But, and then I found this artwork, which is really nice. I like how they add a lot of wrinkles into the shirt, into the gloves and everything. With this one, maybe what I'll do is I could kind of have fun with it. Maybe I could do the shirt coming up here where you see a little underboob and it's stretched across. I was thinking of maybe trying something like that. It'd be a little bit more fun. Or maybe I'll take the shirt down to there. I'm not really sure yet. We'll see. And then if you look over here, they did a lot of wrinkles on the skirt. So I got to kind of come up with some ideas and stuff and kind of plan it out. But for right now, I have to prep the statue. So the way this statue is casted up, to give you guys an idea, is most of these large statues, or any statues in general, are not casted up in one piece. They're always separated. So I've worked on this one enough where this head is glued in, this arm and this arm over here from the leaves are glued in, the torso body is casted as one piece, and these two legs are casted and glued in at the end, because it'll be very hard to paint all this stuff in if this is all together. So she comes in like, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces basically of the main body. So that's kind of how she is there. Now, this statue, of course, has a lot of like chopping up to do. We got to chop up all these leaves here to get this nice and smooth. We got to chop up these leaves down here on her boots. We got to chop up all these leaves here. So when I say chop up, I'll be grinding out this stuff, and then I'll use Aves to kind of rebuild the areas. And then from there, we get a nice smooth look and everything. So that's kind of what we have to do with that. Then we have these vines that are glued in the back of her leg that got to be broken out. She's got nice heels on her, so this will be kind of cool for Jessie, where she'll have nice heels on her boots once I get those cleaned up. And it'll be really good. Now this part over here, I'll have to chop up this to get the skirt going. So the skirt will go up pretty high. We don't have to go down low. We could go up pretty high and have that little V thing going there on her as well, sort of like that. So I think that'll be kind of nice and sexy and a little bit of a look for her as well. Now as far as her base goes, you can see the base is these vines. It's kind of like these rocks and vines for you know, poison ivy. She came with these pieces that connect onto it for her, like, you know, her powers. Now I'm not going to utilize this base for her, this project. I want to focus on giving her a simple base. I'm not going to go crazy with the base. So my idea is I'm going to grab some of my pizza tin containers. I'm going to make a base about maybe like that thick, just so it supports her. I don't want it to be very wide. And then what I'll do is I'll send it out to my friend Meta John in Canada, and he could do an etching, a really nice etching of a Pokeball. So, you know, we'll have a Pokeball symbol on top of the base and a black base, and so that way it doesn't take away the character that much. I don't want anything going crazy to take away the character. I want to keep it nice and small, so this way this statue can like fit in a nice like Besta or something like that. So that's kind of where I'm thinking about that. So I'm just like planning out loud in my head and just giving you guys an idea. But of course, working on the project, anything can change down the line, because I have the idea, I know what I want to do, but sometimes things work, sometimes things don't work. Sometimes I find a better chemical or product that might change things up. So we'll see how things go. But the idea is we're going to take an anime type character and we're going to throw it on a superhero statue and see how she looks like as a cosplay type of superhero look to her. So I think it should be a fun project. So what I'm going to do is the next time I get a chance, when I go into the garage and I chop up items, or I'm doing a sanding day, that'll be a good day for me to get in the garage and do all the grinding on this item. Now sometimes I strip the items and I take a lot of paint off, but sometimes I'm just kind of, with this one I won't really have to. It's a good time to do it because we're in the middle of winter, beginning of January. It's very cold out, so my Dremel tool can actually run a lot longer and it won't overheat, and I can get all this grinded out in like a day, whereas in the summertime, when the garage is like 90 to 100 degrees, something like this, I can only Dremel for like maybe 30 minutes before my Dremel tool starts getting so hot, I have to let it cool down for like, you know, 2 hours or so. So this would be a good time to actually grind this out before the summer hits too, or spring. So that's kind of what my idea. I think it should be a fun project. We'll see how this goes throughout 2020, and at the end, hopefully it'll look pretty cool and it'll be a nice little superhero realistic type of, you know, Jessie from Pokemon. So next step, we'll get in the garage, we'll get it chopped up, and we'll continue on with the series. Okay, got my goggles on. As you can see, make sure you have protective eye gear. And we're going to start breaking off one of these legs at least. Or maybe what we'll do is we'll take some of these pieces off. So basically just take a screwdriver, pop it on out. I really don't care what these pieces happens to these, because they're not really that salvageable anyway. You can see they were kind of glued in. Something like this back here is really glued in pretty tough, so we'll try to get a nice little... And you can hear stuff flying all over the place. That's why you wear your goggles. So you can see what they did is they use screws in the casting, and then they kind of glued it in. So that's something I've really never seen before. They actually use screws. Usually it's just metal rods, but I guess they had screws at some point. I mean, we can do a little experiment. No, they're kind of like cheap screws and garbage stripping. That's alright, that's going to get dremeled out anyway. So you can see that stuff came out fairly well. Now the legs. Let's try and... Okay, The legs are a little bit tricky because we want to break it at the key or the key. We don't want to break it at the thigh. So let's just see if we'll get lucky and one of these will go without giving me much issues. Now if you feel you're not getting enough of a thing, we could kind of... Alright, so we're definitely getting one key coming out, so that's good news. Alright, that's okay. You can see all that stuff that broke away because that's all going to get rebuilt, but I guess they did use screws all over this one for keying. That's pretty interesting. So what it is the key, actually the male part was here, the female part was in this leg, so you can see. But now I have an easier time to Dremel this back out. I have an easier time to get these screws out. I can sand this leg down and go from there. So you can see all these pieces are flying all over. Now for the head. I want to take the head off and I want to take the arms off because it's going to be much easier to actually do all this later. So let's see if we can take this down. Because like I said, we're looking at the picture, she has a collar, so I'm going to be wanting to get in here anyway, and I don't like tremoling too close to a face. So let's see if we can, without... Sometimes you just got to be patient with these. You don't want to go too crazy. Of course, this is not the best screwdriver in the world, so I'll probably break the screwdriver before I break anything else sometimes. Let's see if we can get a better here. Trying to... Okay, so that happens time from time too. Let's see if we can... I don't want to snap off the back of the hair to like... We might need another screwdriver or a tool. Let's see. Yes, I go through this a lot when I do these items. Sometimes they work, they pop out, and sometimes they don't. Alright, this is kind of what, this was a common problem. This arm broke here. That kind of happened with a couple of the ones in the past that I've gotten. So you can see, it broke off there. That's fine. I was expecting that. It'll make life a little easier, I guess. Let's see if we can go in this direction again. So what we'll do is, see, I really don't even need to save these little pieces because I could kind of rebuild that with some wrinkles of the gloves. So that's fine. My most important thing was I didn't want to destroy the hair. So we're definitely going to loosen this now. You just got to try to get this off. Let's see if we can kind of go in here without destroying the... Alright, so you can see this cracked out back here, but what it was is this is a metal rod in there. Well, actually that's a screw too. It looks like they use screws all over this one. That's kind of crazy. So what it is, the head got glued in at the end like so. So you can kind of see they use some glue in there or something, and that's kind of how they attach it. So now my life is a lot easier. I'll have to break out this arm, which I'm not worried about these little hair pieces. I can add those and fix those later on. There we go, that came right out. So you can see that was keyed into there like that. And then they probably touched up some of the paint. So we have her all broken down, which is great. Next step is chopping. So let me grab some of my Dremel bits. I'll show you what I'm going to do. And this is all I'm going to do this off camera, because when we come back she'll be chopped up a lot. I might even strip the paint too, just to get some dipper and some acetone. I did some videos on that. Get all the paint off the item too, because sometimes it's more of a pain to Dremel the item with the paint, because sometimes that paint creates a fume or it melts and it gets, so sometimes it's better just to get all that paint off, and this will be easier now that it's in pieces. So let me grab my Dremel bits, we'll go over some of those, and then hopefully by the next step we'll come back and she'll be all chopped up. Okay, I locked it in, and you can see it's a nice little thin sandpaper. Now the problem with this is it works out great, but it's also a pain. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kick on the vacuum cleaner and I'll show you what this can do. This is used a little bit, this sandpaper is used, but you can get like a little package of them and they're all in there, different sizes and stuff. So it's going to get a little loud. Let me kind of kick on the vacuum and I'll show you what this does. The only problem, like I say, is if you overuse this or you push too much, it breaks on you and you got to put in another one. So you won't be able to sand this whole thing with this. Literally you'll be able to sand a little bit here, and then it'll probably flip on you, break, or go bad, and you got to put another one in. It's good for when you really want to get some like finer stuff than the grind tool like this. So I'm going to kick this on, and we'll kind of show you what it does. So you can see it sands it down nice and smooth, and it doesn't create too much of a grinding thing. But like I say, what happens with this tool is it starts to wear out pretty fast, and then at times what it'll do is it'll just pop right out at you. It'll come like right off, and then what you got to do is you got to unscrew it from here. So if you grab yourself a screwdriver up top, you unscrew it here, right? You got to unscrew this, pop that out, and then put in another one. So you can see these are filler pieces. So these are my go-to tools for a lot of this stuff. This one is a pain, but usually what I'll do is I'll use this grinding tool first, grind this all out, and then I'll use one of these and I'll kind of like smooth it out a little bit, and then I come back with my Aves and I do all my fine tuning. So this is kind of my setup. This is kind of what I do for a lot of my stuff. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to strip the paint off of this probably tomorrow. Try to just get this kind of cleaned up, and then once the paint is off I can start just grinding stuff away. So by the time we come back, this should be all white resin. All this paint should be mostly off of it, and all this should be grounded down, all down here. And then what we do is we start using our Aves epoxy sculpt to start filling everything out. Now if you want to check out, I'll link it in the description. I also did a video series on using acetone to strip polystone statues. Not resin, but polystone statues. So this is all polystone. You could dip this in acetone for like 30 seconds. All this paint will come off with a paintbrush, rubber gloves, mask, and all that. And then literally you just let it dry. And then you just got a bare resin statue with no primer or paint on it. So we're going to do all those steps next. We'll come back. Maybe what I'll do is I'll take some pictures, so we'll have a little bit of a picture thing coming through instead of filming it all. And then hopefully we can start smoothing this all out and start getting it prepped up. Okay, so a little bit of an update. Went in the garage and I did an acetone bath on the items, and I got all that primer and paint off from the factory. That stuff is usually, I guess you could say it's pretty close to like lead-based paint. It's pretty durable on there, so it really needs to get pulled off. And acetone will take it off in like a few seconds. After that was done, I let that dry for about a day, and then the next day I kind of washed it in soapy water just to get any kind of residues or whatever off. And then once that was done, I went in the garage. It took about a few days here and there. While working on other items, I worked on these items too. So, like say if I spent about 5 hours in the garage working on stuff, I would actually put in an extra hour to work on these as well. So I grinded all these down. So as you can see, we got a lot of those leaves off the item. You can see around there, I took out a lot of that detail. We took the vines off the legs. Little screw that went in there, I ripped that out, and I grinded down the feet and stuff here. And it's really messy, but that's going to get all cleaned up next. But you can see we got the screw out over here, that peg. You can see the 3 here as well. So this is all going to be like kind of rebuilt. I find it's easier to sit there and grind it out and rebuild it faster than sitting there trying to sand resin down, because resin takes forever. Plus this is polystone, so this is resin mixed with like stone powder. So it's really, really durable, and it takes forever. So I'd rather use my products on it, build it up, and then sand it down and like really quick than sit there and try to sand this stuff down forever. So the products I'll be using throughout the series is, this is Abe's Fix-It Sculpt. I usually use this for mostly hair sculpting. You mix A and B together. So you mix an equal amount of A and an equal amount of B, and then once you get it all mixed together, you have about a 3-hour work time. So if you want to sit there and sculpt some extra strands of hair and stuff, I'll use this stuff here. But most of the project, which you're going to see, is me using Abe's Epoxy Sculpt. Abe's Epoxy Sculpt is pretty much the same thing as Fix-It, but it's a little bit softer. Abe's Fix-It, like if you're sculpting a strand of hair, the Fix-It will sort of hold its place where the Abe's Epoxy Sculpt sort of kind of flops down real quick. So this stuff is good for a little bit like hair stuff. This is good for more like building up like clothes and all this other stuff. I use the red only because the red is easier to see. I find that I can see the red easier than the other colors. They have a bunch of different colors. They have naturals, whites, blacks, browns, greens, and all this other stuff. But the red is usually on their super sale, and I always like just seeing the red. I find it's easier to see it compared to the other colors. Now I use their safety solvent. They make this specifically for Abe's. Now, a lot of people out there will use water or alcohol, but I find the safety solvent will make the item nice and smooth. You can make it really soft. You can make it almost to like a toothpaste look if you kind of really work it together. And the safety solvent, just as you can use as much as you want, and it really doesn't mess up the Abe's. It's still cure hard as a rock. Now, the other product I'll be using throughout the process is Magic Sculpt. Basically the same thing, but I just find that I can't really sculpt with Magic Sculpt. It's not really like a type of a product that I can sculpt with like adding stuff. I mean, I will use it for specific things on sculpt, like when we're ready to do the skirt on her, I will use the Magic Sculpt to do the piece around it, and then I'll use the Abe's on top of that, but we'll get to that later down the line. But when I drill this piece in a little bit more, when I get this really grinded out, and I get this grinded out, and I want to attach these 2 legs, I will use the Magic Sculpt in here and here in the rod to attach this, and then I'll use the Abe's around that. So Magic Sculpt is always, I find, good for doing pieces together and also building a skeleton and then sculpting on top of that with Abe's. So these are the products I'll be using. I also use a lot of paintbrushes, so you'll see me using a lot of paintbrushes and stuff and all that. So right now the next step is getting the figure back to where I need it to be, like a basic figure, nice and smooth, so I could just start sculpting like cloth and stuff onto the figure. So what I'll be doing is whenever I'm working on other products or projects and I have a little extra Abe's, I'll fill in this item. Or like say at the end of the night, I got a couple extra hours, I finished early with some products and I want to kind of get in there with some extra time. I'll put in an extra hour or 2 and I'll kind of start filling this in with Abe's. So what I'll do is I'll mix up Abe's and then I'll kind of just put Abe's on here and I'll sort of rebuild the figure. And I'll rebuild the muscles, I'll fill in these holes, and then once the Abe's is cured and I get this mostly kind of like finished up with Abe's, I'll go into the garage and I'll sand it all down, I'll prime it up, and then what I'll do is I'll use more Abe's and I'll kind of fill it all down and stuff. So it's basically just keep working the item until I get to that bare human figure again, and then after that's ready to go, we'll start going on to the next steps. But I still got a lot more to go. I gotta chop up these arms. I gotta kind of probably pry out this metal rod in here depending on how far it goes to create a different kind of a setup for the neck. You know, and I just gotta keep going with the figure and stuff. So it's gonna take a little time. It's not something that I can do in like one weekend. I mean, if this was a full-blown commission for someone that had to focus on it, then yes, I could put a lot more time onto it, but like a side project, here and there, we'll get it done. So this right now is going to be the tedious, boring work where you chop it and you get it all back to its basic figure and sand it down, and then you get more fun when you start doing all the sculpting cloth work. So that's where we're at right now. We'll try to either do some fast video here and there, or maybe pictures on updates, and then we'll come back when we're really going to start working on the figure. Okay, so I'm really starting to rebuild this back together. So I did a lot of A's work on the legs and the feet, just kind of rebuilding all this stuff from chopping out all those leaves. So it takes a little bit of time, it's a little bit tedious, but it'll get there. So I need to get a day to get into the garage and really sand all this down. I figure, so now that I got a lot of this done, I can actually sand a lot of these legs and really start like prepping them up. A lot of this stuff that had the vines up here is really what I have to really kind of work at. I'm also looking at some artwork online and some pictures and stuff, so I really want to kind of do a little bit more toning on the body. So I got to see how I'm going to work that out. But after really thinking about it, I really want to work out the abs a little bit more, because taking out all the leaves over here and all the leaves over here really kind of like lost a lot of definition, especially around the rib cage and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the garage when I get a chance, after I sand down the legs, and I'm going to Dremel out some areas around here, do some sand work, and then when I come back, maybe I could do a little bit more A's work to kind of tone up the abs a little bit, because you figure her shirt is going to be covering this, and the skirt's going to be covering this, so we're going to see mostly here. So I figure let's try to like bring out this area a little bit. Now I'm not going to make like a six-pack, but I just want to make it a little bit more toned. So if you look at the sides, she's got a little bit of a thickness to her. So I kind of want to take that down a little bit, just a little bit in here, and then kind of bring out this definition here. So I'm going to have to work out that a little bit too. So the idea is I'm really going to do a lot of rebuilding of all this basic figure first. I really want to do a lot of tone work. I want to get all this really sculpted up pretty well. I want to engineer the head a little bit more, work out the arms. And then I think once I get all that done and it's really nice and good and clean, ready for sculpt work, then we'll focus on the boots. I figure we'll get the boots done. What I'll do is I'll work out this key area here a little bit so this is lined up correctly. We'll have to make a generic base so we can kind of start planning that out. And then I figure once the boots are done and this is lined up, I can attach this and then focus on the rest. So I got to kind of plan as I go. So I just got to get a day into the garage to do some sand work, and then we'll take the next steps from that. Okay, so the other day I was kind of organizing my shelf, and I got a little bit of an inspiration how I really want to work out this item. So I found an item that I was working on and an artist that I bought a kit from, and I'll kind of go over that in a second. But in my garage I have all these grinding metal fan brush things. Over the years, whenever my Dremel tool burns out on me, I go get a new one, and there's always these in there. And I never really use these, only because if you use these long enough on resin or too much, you grind the resin down, or you can even start melting the resin, and like the resin will turn into a liquid and start splashing on you. So I really rarely use this stuff too much, but I wanted to try again with this item. So I went in the garage and I kind of started chopping up the stomach area, and I wanted to see if I can actually do this to the point where I don't have to do a lot of A's work and I could kind of really work out the ab section. And I kind of like where I'm going with it. So you can see I'm trying to get that little thing going there, you know, kind of like that S wavy line, just working out the areas around here. I still got a lot more to do around here, but it's kind of getting there. Now, the reason why I came up with this kind of a look for her ab section is because if you ever heard of this artist called Mike James, he actually done a couple garage kits. This is an old kit I got from him back in, like, I don't know, maybe around 2009, 8, something like that, and I turned it into a Power Girl, but that was like ages ago. It really didn't work out the way I wanted to, and it's been collecting dust on my shelf. One day I'll get back to it, but this is the artist here. I'll link his website in the description if you guys want to check it out. And I'm really kind of like want to follow sort of like how he builds his, you know, how he photoshops his models. So what he does is he does a lot of like Photoshop work where he'll take pictures of models, and then when he does is he kind of exaggerates muscles, the hips, the ab section, and he kind of like cleans up, and he does like Photoshop work and all that stuff. He's even done a couple custom statue work back in the day too. He's done his own kits where he'll customize for people, but he did some Adam Hughes, Emma Frost Sideshow statues where he actually like chopped them up and he did this kind of a look on them. If you guys check it out, I think you'd enjoy it. It's really cool stuff. So that's why I always like looking at a lot of artists online throughout the years and study what they've done and maybe take bits and pieces of stuff that they do and kind of incorporate it. So I'm trying to do that at least with maybe her legs and a sort of her midsection. I think it'll work out pretty good. So you can see what he does is he'll really kind of exaggerate the muscles, the hip area. He'll pull those in a little bit more, the waistline, and he'll work out the ab section. You know, especially like you can see he did that in here with this model as well. Same thing over here. He kind of really like, you know, did a little bit of the extra Photoshop work and kind of toned it in. Like around here as well. This is kind of, you can really see what he did around there. This one here too. This is kind of one I was following a lot of it. How we kind of, so like her arms are down and they're not upward stretching, so it looks like that. But when the female, you know, you're stretching a little bit more, it's a little bit of a different look. So I got to kind of like, you know, follow that look. So you can kind of see how he does this type of stuff. So I'm just going through his artwork and I'm just kind of studying it and seeing what he did on his custom. But I'm going to try to kind of tweak it a little bit more for what I want. But I think we're getting there. I'm really kind of enjoying how this is going to look. But this is the main section where I got to start working, and then of course I got to still work on all this. But I think what I want to try to do is create these little hips how he does. So I'm going to kind of like take in the hip a little bit more here and kind of work on that. I know it's going to get covered with the skirt area, but I think this will look really cool having this midsection a little bit more toned, just to kind of have a little bit more fun with it. So I'll keep playing with it a little bit more here and there, especially with these tools. We'll see how these kind of work out a little bit more. But the thing about these tools is they do grind down very fast, especially over resin. So it's a good thing I have a bunch of them. So I'll get back to sanding and we'll come back and we'll see how it looks. So I have been sanding this down for the end of the night. I've done all my other projects, so I figured let's get this sanded up. So I smoothed out a lot of this areas. I still got more to go. I did smooth out more of the chest area. I smoothed out the waist area, especially the thighs. But mostly I focused on the feet, just trying to get these feet all sanded up, as you can see, smooth, and just work them out as best as I can. So at this point, what I like to do is prime the item. I really like to see where I'm at, because when you have a color of red Aves and a color of white resin, it's kind of hard to see what's going on, because sometimes you get kind of like an illusion where it's like, oh, it looks good, but then when you start like putting primer on, you realize stuff's messed up. The other thing too is working with hard polystone resin and Aves on a situation like this. What happens is when you go and sand down the item, you'll sand the Aves faster than you will sand the resin, because this is a little bit softer because it doesn't have stone powder mixed in it. This does, so this will go down faster than this. So right now there's a spot over here where sanding this down, this Aves in here sanded way faster than this resin. So now I got a little spot that's kind of like indented in there, so I have to kind of fill that in. Just rubbing my finger around it, it goes into the red Aves and then it comes back out to the resin. So that's something you got to kind of think about when you're working with polystone. Regular resin, like smooth on resin or garage kit, anime kit stuff, really they kind of sand down at the same pace, because you know they don't have that stone powder in there. Now I use a Duplicolor filler primer from the auto body store. This is the only primer I really use on all my projects, because I don't have any problems with it being tacky. It never really, I never really have a problem with it bleeding. It dries very fast. It sands down beautiful. It wet sands beautiful. It's my go-to primer. I've tried tons of other companies of primers, and I find that Duplicolor filler primer is the stuff that I use for all my customs and kits, and it just works out great. The only downside about this is if you're working on a small kit or something that has a lot of detail, that's very fine detail, if you use too much of the Duplicolor filler primer, you'll lose that detail. So it's just something you got to kind of think about. But for building a basic body structure like what I'm doing now, this stuff's amazing. Now, just to give you guys a little bit of a tip, basically this is an airbrush booth. Well, it's kind of like a priming booth I created. And what it does is I got a little filter in here, and then under here I got a little piping that comes underneath into my shop vac. So this helps me suck up a lot of the dust and the fumes. Well, not really so much as the fumes because I always prime in the garage, but it helps with a lot of dust because if you do it inside, I don't like to prime in the house because the fumes just goes all over, so it's better doing it in the garage. So that's kind of where we're at. And then over there we got good old Chuck from college, a little portrait I did a long time ago, back in '95. So that's kind of funny there. Whenever I prime, I see Chuck. So that's kind of where I'm at now, and we'll just keep plugging away once I get this primed up. Okay, so it is a nice warm day today. I want to take advantage of it and get my generic base casted up while I can. So this way when I go back to sculpting the character and working on it, I can start planning on how to get her into the base too. And then once that's done, I can actually design what I need to do in Illustrator and send it out to my friend Meta Johnny Canna, and he can etch it for me. Now, the idea is I just want a round circle base that's going to be black on the edges, and then on top is going to have the Pokeball symbol etched in. So it's going to be like, you know, the top is like what, white, and bottom's red, and then you got the little circle in the middle. So that's kind of the idea of the base I'm looking for. So as far as making generic bases, it's very easy. You get your 2-part resin, you get your mixing containers, you get your whatever you're going to pour into, whether it's dog dishes or these pizza type tins. I get these all the time now too, different sizes. They're fairly cheap. Resin doesn't stick to it at all, especially if you use mold release, and it works out really well. So the idea is I wanted the round base with the thing, and I didn't really know which one I wanted to use because when you look at these bases, you get a general idea when you flip them over on how it's going to look. So if we have this figure here on this base, that's kind of what it would look there, and then if we have it on there, it would look there. So the other thing too is it's going to be a little bit smaller than what you're seeing here because you got all that metal. I like this one better because I like the idea of it being up and then rounded over like that. This one's at an angle. I wouldn't mind this one here if I could do some kind of like really cool symboling around here, but the only problem is I really want to keep it generic. I want to keep it a little bit easier and a little bit more weight too. I need a little bit of weight so this way it works out pretty well. So we're going to go with this one. Now the other thing too is I've done a couple videos in the past on how to make generic bases. If I was going to make a round base and I was going to sculpt on top of that, I would use like filler pieces. Like I have a box of broken statues or parts or defective stuff that I collect, and I use that as filler for my stuff, whether it's pieces of Aves and Magic Sculpt and stuff like that as well. The only problem with that is when you flip it over and you pop it out and you try to use a nice flats and you sand it, certain resins will sand faster than others, and then you start getting all this little waving going, and it doesn't look right. So with this one, since we're focusing on just the base, I'm going to do straight pours, and I'm going to have perfectly equal amounts of the same type of resin, which is a smooth on, and just do it that way. That's the best way to do it, and it makes life easier with sanding. But if this was going to be casted up, flipped, and then I was going to sculpt like rocks and trees and stuff on it, then I wouldn't care. I would use it as filler. But that's just the easier way of doing it. So all I really need to do now is mix up equal amounts of A and B in one cup. You know, you have A here, you have B here, and then you mix it into one container, and you just pour it in, and you let it cure. Really simple. It's not hard at all. It's just that, you know, fumes and chemicals, and you want to make sure you have a nice level surface too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in the garage. I'm going to spray this down with some mold release. Make sure this is nice and clean in there. And then we'll come back. I'll mix it up. We'll let it cure. And then this way I can start planning on getting her into it and seeing if I want to do anything else. Pretty straightforward. Quick little update. I didn't do any filming on this because I was running out of time with some of this Aves I mixed up. I didn't want it to cure up on me, so I figured while I was working on my other projects and I had a little bit extra, I went ahead and just kind of slapped this on this item as fast as I could, and so I didn't run out of time. So I did work out her abs a little bit more. It's probably hard to see in there because there's a lot of residue. I sort of kind of cleaned it up a little bit, and I worked out the top part of the abs a little bit, so maybe you could kind of see from the side. Just kind of working those areas out a little bit more, just to kind of, I'm trying not to make her super strong, but I figured, you know, at least give her some kind of like nice little ab section. So you can see I worked out her chest and neck a little bit more too. This has got to get all sanded down. The shirt's going to hide a lot of it, but I just need to get the basic shape going because I just dremeled out all those leaves and everything. So I got all that out of there. Underneath her leg over here, there's a big gash from when I used my Dremel tool and everything, so I filled that in. The part under here, because I had the resin, then Aves and resin, it was hard to kind of, you know, sand it down. So I decided just to grind down that whole area, and I slapped the Aves on there to make life easier. What I was doing for the abs though is I have a Tamiya putty. This stuff is really amazing. I use it in a lot of my videos. I use this little spackle paintbrush here to kind of slap it on. It's kind of like spackling, but in a smaller area. So what I did is for the abs, I would kind of like chisel out. It's kind of like drawing with a Dremel tool. You kind of draw out the area, and then you fill it in with some of the Tamiya putty, and then you sand it down, and you get a nice little shape going, and it kind of just helps without having all those, like, you know, hard cuts in there. So you can kind of see over here on the leg, you can see all the gray that's there. So these are kind of like spots of the Tamiya putty that I put on. Just got to kind of clean it up. So that's where I'm at right now. Hopefully the next step is maybe tomorrow or the next day I could get in the garage and sand this all down and prime it up and get it really nice and clean. Then I'm going to have to start planning out how to get this leg attached for when, you know, after I do the boots, I can attach this and make life easier, then work out the skirt. A lot of planning to go on still, but right now we're still kind of working out that basic figure and get everything nice and clean. So hopefully when we come back, maybe most of the figure will be nice and smoothed out, nice and primed, and we could kind of go over how we're going to start planning, you know, all the sculpt work, attaching, and all that stuff. Okay, so pretty much all the tedious and major prep work is done. Next steps are kind of like prepping, but still it's kind of moving more into the engineering part. Like, how am I going to engineer this to kind of sculpt it up? And it's going to be one solid piece. Am I going to make magnets? You know, stuff like that. So that's kind of like the next video. But for right now, we got a lot of the prep work done. So you can see the base came out pretty well. You pop it out of the tin after it cools down. No issues really. The only problem was the top part of it was really bubbling because of the way I poured it in. So all I did was I grinded it down with my electric sander, and then I spackled Bondo onto the bottom of it. Now I don't use Bondo a lot. I really don't like using it because of the fumes, and then I find that Bondo is very like rubbery. It's not really like rock hard like Aves or Magic Sculpt. It's great for cars and boats and stuff like that, but if you're going to be working on the statue, I really, you know, I don't like using Bondo on the figure. I know a lot of guys in the hobby that I've talked to over the years at like Jersey Fest and Wonderfest, they use Bondo for a lot of their kits. Personally, I'm not a fan of it. I stick to Aves or Magic Sculpt, but it's all preference. But it works out great for like leveling something on the base or something like that. So I did grind out the arms a little bit here and there. Next step is I got to see, okay, am I going to attach that to the you know, arms up there? Am I going to make the head removable, not removable, magnetized? Am I going to just attach it and make life easier? So I'm not really sure on how that's all going to happen yet, but we'll see. But you can see a lot of the prep work. You know, I grinded down this leg a lot, smoothed it up. I'm working out a little bit in here. So I'm kind of shaping up the legs just a little bit more. I'm really happy with the ab section. I filled in a little bit over in here with some more putty on the chest. This right here, the whole waist and the booty area will get worked on when I attach the leg after I do the boot. So it's kind of like, you know, I got to plan out, you know, how it's all going to be engineered. I did sand down in here a little bit more as well. So we'll go from there. So I'll kind of explain in the next video what I mean about making a temporary key for the legs and make sure everything is lined up while I sculpt and then attach, because it's going to be a little tricky. And I still have to do a little bit of tedious work later on with like getting all the leaves out of the hair and plan out the head a little bit. So that's kind of like the next video. Still doing a little bit more prep work, but we're kind of falling into that engineering stuff. So I think this is going to be a fun series. It's going to be really cool to see like a character like Jessie from Pokemon be into a more like comic book looking statue, something a little bit different. So it should be a fun series. So guys, thanks for watching. And next video we'll come back and we'll really plan out a little bit more in depth on how we're going to start getting her together while really cleaning it up a lot more.